Good morning. So I'm the creator of Low Tech magazine, and that's a blog I started in 2007 to basically criticize the idea of the vision of a high-tech sustainable society. And what is that? It's pretty simple. The idea that's kind of alive these days is that we simply switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources, and we keep on living the way we are living today. So, for example, we keep driving heavy and fast cars, but the difference is that they now have a battery which is charged by solar power or wind power. There's quite some problems with this vision, so I'm gonna do this very shortly. First problem is that you need a lot more space to harvest, give a similar amount of energy. So fossil fuels are a very compact energy source. If you want to produce a similar amount of energy, for instance, with solar energy, you need a lot of land. And as you can see in the image, that's in the case of solar, it's pretty problematic because it's not really kind of nature. It's the opposite of nature. It's a kind of industrial site that is, yeah, the more solar farms, they call it like that, you build, the more nature will disappear. I'm going to close the window for the noise. Sorry. And the second is, of course, that wind and sun are not always available. You see here in the graph the power output of a wind farm in California. And what you see there, the line in the middle is the average. And that's what we are always talking about. And that's what people, that's the data that people use to kind of demonstrate the usefulness of wind power. They say, for example, okay, this wind farm produces 250 megawatts on average. And then they start calculating how many households and etc. you can power with that. But of course, it's a totally abstract theoretical number because in reality, the only thing you can say is that energy production will vary between 0 and 600 megawatts in the case of this wind farm. So in reality, these households would be without power for quite some time. And thirdly, that is that renewable energy sources, wind power, solar power, are always presented as alternatives to fossil fuels. But the way we are using them now is actually not, doesn't make that true. The problem is that you need a lot of fossil fuels to build solar panels, to build modern wind turbines, and to build energy storage. So the problem I just mentioned before, you can solve it by technology if you produce a lot of batteries, but you also need fossil fuels for that. And in the case of wind turbines, it's really pretty bad in the sense that the blades of wind turbines are actually made of oil. They're made of plastic, and it's a high-tech plastic, but it's plastic and you cannot recycle it. So it's not really renewable energy, solar power, wind power are not, should not be an excuse to keep growing the energy use, because you can destroy the planet just as well. So back to the start is, what do we need to do then? Well, we need to switch to renewable energy, that's pretty sure. But the first thing we have to talk about is what you see in the lower corner at the left. It's the car, it's the lifestyle. If you want to switch from fossil fuels to an energy source that is much less abundantly available, that is not always available, then you also have to adapt your technology to this new reality. And in the case of cars, for example, you could say, well, we could make them smaller and we could make them slower and we could make them less comfortable, but they would still be cars. And if you look at the history of cars, you see, I guess everybody knows this one. I don't know if it got all the way to Estonia, but in France, of course, they are very common. It's the De-Electrify from 1949. And a few years ago, I compared it to the smallest car of the same manufacturer, the Citroën C1. And I discovered that they consume just as much fuel, the new one and the old one. And it's pretty weird because in these 80 years, we had a lot of progress in more energy efficient engines. But still, if you drive the smallest Citroën today, it's not going to use less fuel than the one from 1949. And that is, of course, because all the progress in energy efficiency was not really used to lower the energy use. Instead, it was used to raise performance. So we got heavier cars, we got faster cars, we got more comfortable cars. They're full of electronics. Everything works electrically. So in the De-Electrify, to open the window, you just pushed your elbow against the window and it opened up. If you wanted to know how much fuel there was in the tank, you had to put a stick in the tank and then see how much gasoline was left. So all these things make that, well, cars didn't get any more energy efficient than they were in 1949. And the same can be seen with electric cars, because of course electric cars are nothing new. They are actually predating gasoline cars, and they were more popular in the early 20th century than gasoline cars. And this is the Fritzl electric, and you can see that it had a range of 100 miles, which is similar to the range of many electric cars today, like the Nissan Leaf, that the first, say, more or less democratic electric car that came out in 2012. So there again, all this progress in which is real, like better batteries, has been used to make electric cars heavier, faster, more comfortable.
So what year was this? What year was this electric car?
Excuse me?
Do you know the year of this electric car?
Sorry, that was 1908. This one. 1908, so more than 100 years ago. And that also shows there's a huge potential for improvement without giving up the technology. So if you make cars smaller again, if you make them slower, if you make them less comfortable, you still have this advantage in more energy efficient gasoline engines or batteries. So you could actually reduce the energy use of cars with orders of magnitude and still keep what you could consider a car. Of course, depends on your definition of what a car is. This is another example. It's called a Velo Mobile. It's a recumbent bike with a bodywork, so it's very aerodynamic. You can easily get higher speeds than with a normal bicycle. And people now also put electric hybrid system motors in these vehicles. And then, well, you can go pretty fast, like around 50, 60 kilometers an hour. And for quite some distance, the range is bigger than an electric car. And for a fraction of the energy use. So you need a very small battery compared to an electric car, because your vehicle is so much lighter and slower. And yeah, of course, it doesn't have all the electronics and air conditioning and all these things. So that is a bit, that's an important point, that people often think like it's either growing technology forever and keeping inventing new things, or going back to the Stone Age. But as you can see, there is a lot of differences, a lot of possibilities between those two extremes. Yeah, there's another example, that's a trolley bus. I don't know if you had them in Estonia, could well be, but they used to be common in most of the world, and then in the 60s they disappeared because of the people started using diesel buses. But for all the talk about electric vehicles, well, the trolley bus actually gives all the advantages of electric transportation, but it does not have all the disadvantages that come with the battery, because it's always connected to the overhead line. So you don't need to build a battery that weighs a couple of tons, that requires a lot of mining and factories, etc. They also had trolley trucks. So early 20th century, there were several places in Europe where they were basically trucking around cargo with electric transportation, but without batteries. And they even had trolley boats. So we had a kind of network of 3,000 kilometers, mostly in Germany, Belgium, and France, of trolley canal boats that, again, were operating electrically without any batteries. Now, as I told you, Low-Tech magazine is kind of critical of these high-tech visions of sustainability, but at the same time, we try to give alternative options. So what then, not just criticizing, but also trying to offer solutions. And for that, we often look for inspiration to the past. Because of course, in the past, people had not an abundantly available source of energy. They had to be, by definition, they had to be very efficient. They had to be very, yeah, they could not waste energy like we obviously do. And one example is the heating. Today we heat buildings. Well, we actually heat buildings, and in earlier times, people were heating people. It was the strategy was fundamentally different. So instead of heating up a complete room, all the complete volume of air in a room, we used very small local heat sources that basically kept people thermally comfortable without heating up the whole room. And that is, of course, much more energy efficient. And not just a little bit, like 20% or 30%, it's really like orders of magnitude that you can still have comfort, and you use 20 times less energy. And those are the solutions that we need, of course, that radically reduce energy use and resource use. This is a hooded chair, by the way. It was used to sit in front of the fire, and the fire is a radiant energy source, so it basically heats you directly, but the problem is that it only heats the front and not the back. So people designed these chairs that kind of insulated their back while they were receiving the radiant heat from the fire. The four-poster bed is another example. In older houses, only one room had heating systems. That was the kind of the kitchen, living room. And the other rooms were unheated, but that didn't mean that it was uncomfortable there. But for example, this bed, people got into the bed, closed the curtains, and after a while, simply the body heat, the human body heat, warmed up this little space, and it became very comfortable. In Japan, they're still using it. This is a kotatsu. It used to be, it's a small table with a huge blanket that people, the whole family puts their legs underneath. And they used to be heated by coals from the fire, but these days it's small electric heaters, and there's a lot of furniture that you can buy with it. And that is essentially still what the Japanese do. They don't really heat spaces, they heat themselves in certain locations in the space. And there's, of course, the hot water bottle that also has a long history and does the same. It also works outside, not just inside. So heating the air is not really working outside, but if you kind of start heating people directly, it is perfectly possible, even outside in the cold. Now back to the energy sources themselves. So we have these wind turbines that are very high-tech and with plastic blades and steel towers. But we had very different windmills in earlier times. We did not invent renewable energy sources in the 20th century. It's thousands of years old. And this, for example, is a sawmill from the Netherlands. It's from the 1600s. And it's just one of many. So north of Amsterdam, you had in the 1600s, you had an industrial site with more than 1,000 windmills that were all doing industrial works. For example, you had the sawmill, as I mentioned already. You also had paper mills, you had polishing mills, you had grain mills, you had kind of every basic operation that you can think of was wind powered in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is a very flat country like Estonia, I guess. So water power is of limited use, which was more important in other countries. And that is why the Dutch went for wind power. Same with transportation. We did not invent global trade. It's thousands of years old, and it was all based on a renewable energy source, the wind. But here you see already how people did things differently. Like, for example, if we're now talking about making shipping more sustainable, people think about, okay, what we can do is we put a lot of windmills near the shore, we produce electricity, we then make hydrogen, and we then put the hydrogen in the ships so that they can cross the ocean without producing emissions. But of course, it's a very complicated way to do things. If you can just put a sail on a ship and let it work whenever the wind blows. And that is much more efficient, it takes much less resources, and it works just as well. Of course, it requires one, say, change in strategy in tactics, and that is you have to adjust to the weather and the seasons. And that's exactly what people did with sailboats. If there was no wind, well, they stayed ashore. Same with windmills. If there was no wind, the factories were simply not operated. Except when they were very crucial for like food production, then you had a backup, a limited backup available in the form of horse mills. So then they just use horses to mill the grain, for example, instead of the wind. But most other industrial activities just stopped whenever the wind was gone. And of course, this principle could be applied to our modern factories also, because many of these basic industrial processes that were done in the Middle Ages are still important today. We still have to make holes, and we have to saw wood, and we have to basically process materials. And this is an example from more than 10 years ago by now. It's a wind-powered knitting machine, and it does exactly what it says. So whenever the wind blows, it kind of continues to knit the scarf, and if the wind stops blowing, it just stops and nothing goes wrong. I mean, it's not that the product gets damaged, it just takes a bit longer to make it. And it doesn't work with every production process, but it works with a lot of production process, because in spite of all the high-tech stuff we use, it's all still based on very basic material processes. Yeah, so reintroducing sailboats would be a great idea. It would also offer a lot of interesting jobs. I often get mails from young people these days telling me what the hell they should be doing with their life. Well, you could become a sailor, and it would be an adventurous job that is hard to find these days. Adventurous jobs, they're all boring office jobs. You could also apply the same principle to trains, and that would be a completely new application of this centuries-old approach to deal with renewable energy. For example, freight trains, they could run whenever you could put solar panels and wind turbines along the lines, along the tracks. And whenever the wind blows or the sun shines, the freight train would move, and even the speed of it could be determined by the wind speed or the amount of solar insolation. And when there's clouds, when the night falls, when the wind falls away, the trains just stop. And of course, you can do it for passengers, but then it gets more complicated. It kind of requires more fundamental change in lifestyle that yeah, I could come to Estonia, for example, to give a talk, but I would not be able to promise when I would be there, because it would depend on the weather. a third difference you see with the earlier windmills is, well, they were made from 100% recyclable materials. So it was all natural materials, wood, canvas, ropes. And so they were the circular economy that we are talking about so much these days. It obviously did exist. So the question is not how we're going to get there, but why did we lose it? And so that's a windmill actually, and there's still, like in the Netherlands but also in France, in Belgium, there's still thousands of these old medieval windmills standing, and some of them are still operating. And then you wonder, how could that be? It's 500 years and it's all made of wood and it's still there. Well, because these windmills were constantly repaired. So after a couple of 100 years, basically every part of it was changed. Like some part of it is rotten, you replace it with another wooden board, and 300 years later, it's still the same windmill, but every element has been replaced. And it's a totally different approach to how we build wind turbines now. We build them and then we kind of take them down, and we don't know what to do with them. It's becoming a huge problem, which is not really showing yet because most wind turbines are still were placed quite recently. So, but in like 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to have a huge number of windmill waste, and that's not really sustainable. Okay, I see I'm running out of time, so yeah, so these are a couple of these things that I learned from putting my nose in history books for all these years. But another thing, I use this knowledge to kind of try to apply it to today and to learn from it and to live in a more sustainable way. And the first thing I did was in 2016, I took my office off the grid. And I kind of, of course, I needed electricity because I use a laptop and electric lights, but I'm renting the place and I cannot really put a solar array on the roof. Also, I don't have the money for it. So I decided to take a very different approach. I decided to wire my office like it was a sailboat or a caravan. So in sailboats, caravans, you have low voltage electricity systems that use the DC electricity from solar panels without converting it to 220 volts. And that has a lot of advantages. First of all, you win kind of 30% of energy production because there's no need to do the voltage conversion. And well, you can put solar panels on the balcony, on the windowsills, and another advantage is that you can easily clean them. Solar panels, especially here in Spain, get very dirty very quickly. Energy use comes down. And of course, if they're on your roof, you cannot really clean them so easily. Another advantage is that I can easily change the tilt of the panels, and that gives a lot of difference, especially in winter. Like the ones on the right you see are more upright. They are positioned for winter. And if you do that, you have so much more power production than when you keep them flat in the winter. Again, if that's on your roof, you cannot do that. If you do it small scale, you have much more control. And that means that you can get quite a lot out of what seems to be very small solar panels, what are actually very small solar panels. So I just built them with wood and Meccano, and I converted the technology I use to 12 volts. So for instance, with the lights, you can easily do that. You just cut off the plug and you put the 12 volts plug. Computer, you can buy these things that people use in their cars or their trucks. And of course, it's part of it. So my office works, especially in summer, I can basically do whatever I want. If in winter, it's a bit different. If it's a couple of days of bad weather, I need to adapt my use of technology. And I can do that in many ways. I I can use my tablet instead of my laptop. I can use a very small LED light, like I have a lamp here that is 3 watts LED. Well, if it's really necessary, that's all the light I need, and I can work with very little energy. And in the worst case, I can go to another place. I can go to the library. I can go to a friend's place. I can go to a bar, or I can use my typewriter, which is quite an amazing machine. You don't need electricity for it. So you can basically go out with your typewriter, sit on the beach, and write 16 hours without stopping. Try that with a laptop. But the greatest advantage of the typewriter is that it is just used for writing, and you cannot do anything else. There's no Twitter feeds, there's no emails, there's no distraction at all. It's a writing machine, literally. Yeah, and then if I still have, oh my God, I'm a bit slow, no?
You can go a bit more, yeah. Then we have the Q&A, so prepare.
Yeah, that's why I speed up. So another example is as a blogger, I was of course part of the problem, because I had a website that was using a lot of energy. I didn't really realize it. So I'm going a bit faster here. So when in 2018, I got an offer from 2 design students in the US to redesign the website. And that was the start of the project to think like, what would be a low-tech website, a sustainable website? And the surprise was that the same thinking can be applied to a modern technology like the internet. Like, if you want a solution, just look back to the past and you will find it. And we found a solution in the first website ever made, which you see here. It's a static website. And this is the new Low-Tech magazine website, which is entirely based on this old first website from the 1990s. And as you saw in the first website, didn't have images, but we compressed them in a radical way with a dithering plugin. And we made a super lightweight website that runs on the small server that you see here. This is a server, this is a charge controller, and this is the website. So it uses just 1 watt of power. And that means it can run on a solar panel that is here on the balcony. And it has a very small battery, which I don't think I have an image here. No, it has a very small battery, because the battery is the most unsustainable and the most expensive part of any off-grid power system. So you need to keep it as small as possible. And that means that if the weather is really bad, like 1 day is pretty much okay, 2 days, it's over, the website goes down. As if it was a sailboat, as if it was a windmill, it just goes down. And if you want to see it, you're gonna have to wait. And we have a battery meter here that kind of informs the readers. We have obviously a weather provision, because the server of the website is located here in Spain, in Barcelona, but the readers are not necessarily here. I mean, the majority of the readers are anywhere across the world, and they don't know what weather it is in Barcelona. That's why we added this. And then we also made a printed version, because in the end it's about content, and if the internet would disappear, well, too bad, but also not too bad. I mean, we can still read the same, you can still read the same content in an invention that was called the book, and it's really great. You don't need to charge it, you can read it in direct sunlight. You can share it with other people, and so on. The book will always survive. Then quickly, human power. Human power was historically the most important source of mechanical energy. And so, for instance, this is a human power crane from Belgium from the Middle Ages to lift goods from ships. This is digging the Panama Channel that was done by hand, like with just shovels. And now fast forward to 2022, and we have the battery-powered pepper mill, the battery-powered pepper mill. That's where we ended up. with even an action so small, so little, that requires so little power, we decide to automate it, to put batteries inside it, so that we don't have to do the effort to kind of yeah. So with a colleague in the Netherlands, well, this is actually, oops. Well, first let me talk about the bike. It's standing here behind me. I actually, yesterday, a couple of days ago, we discussed if I should maybe use it to power the presentation, but then this morning, when I got up, I didn't feel like that. So it's a grid-powered presentation. But with another intern, Marie Verde, we built a human-powered generator that is practical for the household. And you can just start pedaling, and then you can choose what type of electricity you want. And we powered all kinds of things: air compressors, lights, the dot matrix printer, the soldering iron. And it actually, human power is very useful if you combine it with sun or wind, because here, for example, with the website, if it's bad weather and the website is going down, now imagine I just got a link from a very big website and there's a lot of traffic coming to the website. Well, I would prefer to stay up, but I have no way to do that. I had no way to do that until now. But now I can decide, all right, let's just power it by I power it myself, and it keeps online. So human power is very much a backup source to small scale solar and wind energy. It's like if you really need it, you can 1 hour of pedaling can give you a lot of can give you hours of light, for example. In case there is no sun or no wind. And we kind of based the whole, with a colleague in the Netherlands, Melle Smet, we made a whole project around it. It's an art project. It's called Human Power Plant. And we envision how the world, the modern world, would look like if all energy came from humans. And yeah, of course, this is a human powered student building. You see the guy here below. Yeah, it's kind of the new normal. People got a bit stronger again because they have to produce power. We took out there's no time to explain this whole scenario. You can find it on the humanpowerplant.com website. But it kind of summarizes a lot of ideas of what in Low Tech magazine in a more kind of say accessible way, to envision the whole community that works according to this to these ideas. And also there, so it's a human powered building, but on the roof you have some wind turbines, and if it's windy, well, then the students don't have to produce power anymore, and they actually have more than enough energy to enjoy all these modern wasteful technologies like jacuzzis and sound amplification and electric guitars and everything. On a windy day they can do that. Okay, now I'm gonna shut up and let the questions come.
The first one is I'm going to take it about the human power plant. So remind me, how many people were planned in this building and how many hours per day did they have to work out then? Yeah.
Yeah, that depends on the lifestyle. That's the whole exercise. So for example, with the showers, we started first from the say business as usual, and we investigated how long, I mean, these data are available, how long do people in the Netherlands, because that's where the building is, how long do they shower? And it turns out they shower on average 9 minutes, almost every day. And then since we had 750 students, we quickly discovered, like, okay, but if we have to produce that energy to heat the water, and every student is going to shower every day 9 minutes, then we come into an absurd situation. It means that all students need to produce power for 24 hours a day when they are not showering. So you're basically either showering or you're producing power for others to shower. So okay, that doesn't work. So we had to reduce it until we got to a kind of reasonable effort. And that is, well, you can shower 1 minute a day if you want a hot shower. If you want a cold shower, you can shower as much as you want, because the energy use is all in the heating of the water. So we have you can shower 1 minute a day. That has a lot of consequences, of course, like for instance, long hair disappears. Nobody in the community has long hair anymore because you cannot really wash it in 1 minute. And these are kind of, it was a kind of middle scenario, and then you had to work like 3 hours a day. So 3 hours a day, the students are in this, the lower 3 floors are communal power production fitness spaces, let's say, where people practice. I mean, we're doing it now. Many of us are going to the fitness where we waste energy. We often drive there. So in this building, the fitness is kind of at the same time the power plant of the building. But not just that, it also supplies the heat. So you see these kind of things on top of people. They suck up the heat and they distribute it to the building with these pipes that you see here. You still see the images, no?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the pipe coming in, and that's actually the body heat from the students that are now producing power, because humans produce a lot of heat when they are active, is coming through these pipes into the individual rooms of the students who are not producing power. And if it's really cold, they can even they can put on this suit, and they can plug themselves literally into the heat source, and then it becomes super efficient in the sense that you're not heating the space anymore. You're just heating a very small volume of air between your body, your naked body, and this suit. And that's the body heat of your colleagues, basically. So it's not the most, I mean, it's probably a bit smelly, but in terms of energy efficiency, it's unbeatable. Of course, it's an art project. It's not Low-Tech magazine, which is more scientific, but.
And I think in the beginning of this article, you also had the notion that if we have an energy crisis, then one thing that is always increasing is human population. So human power is always increasing, actually.
Yes, it's so this project is centered around basically the idea that when we talk about energy sources, we always forget human power. It's wind, nuclear, solar, fossil fuels, but human power is also an energy source, and it's actually the only energy source that increases as the population grows. Anything else needs to be distributed over a growing world population. So that's not the case with human power. Of course, there are other issues with human power. If you look into history, the question is, yeah, I mean, the great advantage is that human power is always available. It's not dependent on the weather, but it is, of course, dependent on does the person feel like producing power, or is the person forced to produce power? So it's kind of a tricky proposal, let's say.
So any other questions from the crowd? I see the first hand raised. What? When will this become true? Okay, the follow-up question to the previous one. When will this human power plant become a reality, if ever?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this student building does actually exist. I mean, the building itself exists. It's an empty building on the campus in Utrecht. And it's a problematic building because it's just standing there. It's full of asbest. And yeah, they don't know what to do with it. Demolishing it is too expensive. That's why we kind of proposed them, like, look, let's turn a problem into a solution and make it into a showcase of sustainable living. But they did not give us the building. So for now, it's just an idea. Although we put advertisements in for student rooms on a website in Utrecht, and we had 60 people applying for a room in just 24 hours. So we took it off again because there are no rooms. But to our surprise, people actually thought it was a great idea. Of course, the price of the rooms helps, especially because the higher you get, so on the 22nd floor, because there's no elevator, it takes a while to get there. And so the higher the room is, the cheaper it is. And students apparently made calculations like, okay, now I have to pay a lot of rent. At the same, that means I need to do some shitty job to pay the rent, and then I also need to go to the fitness to keep in shape. So in this building, actually, I can do everything at the same time, and I win a lot of time. So it's not such apparently not such a fantasy. It could be reality. But also, this is students. What we did do, but I don't think I have the images here. We are now working on a similar scenario for a whole neighborhood in Rotterdam. And that is becoming reality in the sense that we have, not the whole neighborhood is human powered yet, but we have one housing block in the neighborhood where we kind of literally build the stuff that we envision in these visuals. And we actually discovered that because it's a very poor neighborhood, that there are people who already live what we are promoting. There's people who actually have been living like that. For example, our neighbor, we have a kind of neighborhood house there, and our neighbor Hans, he lives without heating and without electricity. He's an alcoholic. It may be part of the explanation, but still, I mean, this guy needs nothing. He's a very friendly guy. He loves to talk. He always is dressed very nicely. But in his house, there is nothing. There's not a fridge. There's just a bed and a crate of beer. And he always leaves the door open because he likes to have the cats visiting. He takes cold showers because he has no electricity. And he's just used to it. And it was a very weird thing because we are trying to do our effort to kind of make people aware of how they should reduce energy use. And the guy next door just lives without it. So, yeah. Okay. Next question.
In the slideshow, we saw different power systems of yours. And you pointed out that the battery is always the most unsustainable part of it. Can you explain it a bit further?
Yeah, so maybe I make this question a bit more broader. The thing is that these days, when we talk about, say, solar power, for example, we always think of solar panels. And so we see solar power as by definition, it's producing electricity, and you have to kind of somehow store it in a battery and then use it when you need it. But you can use solar power in a lot of ways, and many of those are much more sustainable than producing electricity. The first is, of course, for example, you hang your clothes on a clothesline outside, and it's being they are dried by the sun and the wind. And you can, of course, use a tumble dryer, an electric tumble dryer, connected to solar panels and batteries, and then dry your clothes with so-called renewable electricity. But when you compare that to the clothesline, which uses direct solar energy, it's, of course, that is much more sustainable because you only need a rope and that's it. And the thing is that that's one part of the answer. And more specifically, if the batteries, the problem is not really known because most solar PV installations these days are connected to the grid. So people who have solar panels on their roof, they don't really notice when there is no sun, because then what this installation does, it takes energy from the grid and it kind of replaces the local solar energy. The same with surpluses, like in summer, you have much more solar energy and then you probably have too much solar, and that also goes to the grid. Now, that kind of circumvents the energy storage issue, but the problem is if everybody does that, it's not working anymore. because somehow if the whole Estonia is powered by solar energy and there's a day when there is no solar energy, yeah, then there's nothing to take from the grid. So energy storage is a kind of yeah, you cannot really get around it from the moment you start using solar on a larger scale, because now actually the battery of these solar systems are the fossil fuel powered coal plants and gas plants that are still there. But the battery, if you look at, if you calculate the embodied energy, like what it takes to produce a battery or a solar panel, then you see that the battery is a much bigger problem, mostly because of its short life expectancy. So a solar panel, it takes energy to produce, but then it lasts for at least 25, 30 years and probably much longer, because we calculate it as if it produces less than 80%, we consider it end of life. But of course, it still produces energy. Batteries, on the other hand, it depends a lot on how you use them. But if a lead acid battery lasts 5 years, you may be happy. So every 5 years, you have to mine new resources or recycle the metals. You have to transport everything. You have to produce everything. And that is that you can perfectly build a solar system like this website we have could be always online. But we would need 7 times more batteries, because if you want 100% reliability, that means you have to be prepared for the most uncommon events. Like, for example, in Barcelona, 2 weeks of clouds, no sun. It's very unusual, but it does happen from time to time. And if you want to keep everything online or whatever, you have to keep the lights, you're gonna have to add a lot more batteries. And that is why off-grid power systems, including our website, usually aim for 95% efficient uptime, because that has turned out to be the most optimal combination between uptime, reliability on one hand, and on the other hand, the costs, the size, the space it takes, and the energy sources, the sustainability to produce them. So, and that is a kind of what we should make people aware of, that if they would just allow for some change in lifestyle, like for instance, if there are some studies showing that if the UK, that's a country with a lot of renewable energy sources, if it would accept to have 1 month per year that there's not enough electricity, then the whole country could be powered by renewables. It just takes like 30 days a year to say like, okay, today we stop our factories, we don't go to work, we just stay in the bed. It's pretty simple, actually.
I think that's just, with most of these articles, when you read them in the Low Tech magazine, you like, in the end, you're like, oh my God, how did I not know this? It's so simple. Oh, I have been a fool all my life.
Well, there is a very good explanation for that, and that is because we don't have historical context. We are completely blinded whenever we try to find solutions. We are stuck in the 20th and 21st century, and we forget that before the 1900s there was a lot of other. There were also humans, and they also had the same needs as we do. They need to be warm. They need a shelter. They need to move from one place to another. And from the moment you look at this issue in a historical context, the solutions become very obvious. And that's what I learned through all these years. Like, yeah, just whatever is the topic, look at it in the context of the entire human history, and the solution will become very obvious.
Yeah, any more burning questions from the crowd? Yes, there is one, or maybe even two.
Thank you, Kris. My name is Michael. I have a question about the electric car in 1904, I believe it was. 1908.
Yeah.
All right. Was it ran on batteries?
Yes, these were lead acid batteries.
Wow.
Yep.
That was my question. Yeah.
I think lead acid batteries are like 150 years old at least. Yeah.
I think that's really one valuable point. Yes.
One last
Yes.
question.
A side comment is that, again, why I recommend to read the Low-Tech magazine is that it kind of broadens your horizon on this like really physical topic. So what is power? It can be transmitted by electricity, but also it can be like transmitted mechanically, by compressed air, by pressurized water, so by ropes. So it's like all these technologies, like slightly before the fossil age, have been really, really ingenious. But yes, the last question.
Yeah, thank you. Super inspiring. So my question is, what do you think? Why have we shifted from, from everything? Why do we need to use the pepper mills with batteries? And why do we have this stupid shift? Why has it happened?
Well, my guess is that it's. I think the main factor is that it's. There's a commercial motive behind that, because our society, our economic system is driven by growth. It cannot really survive without growing forever. And how do you grow forever? Well, you need people to buy stuff. And the problem with the old-fashioned pepper mill, for example, yeah, I mean, I have here one in wood. You buy it and then it lasts forever. And it's not something you can earn a lot of money with. If on the other side you you constantly innovate, between brackets, and you kind of you make things new, and then you kind of motivate people to buy new stuff, and there's always some advantage. I mean, all these new technologies, they are usually aimed at convenience. So we are, of course, all lazy. And yeah, if we can press a button instead of doing some effort, if we can take the elevator and instead of taking the stairs, we take the elevator. I mean, I'm not different from that. I have an elevator in my building. It's just 3 floors, but yeah, if I went shopping and I have things to carry, yeah, and it's 35 degrees, I may take the elevator. But if it's not there, you don't take it. So it kind of, whenever you offer people things that are easier, well, it takes kind of it's you have to fight against it actively, not to use it. So same with the smartphone. Yeah, it kind of brings a lot of convenience to people, also a lot of disadvantages. And if you don't jump on that train, like I don't have a smartphone, well, my life is getting more complicated every day. But I think the commercial motive is the economic system is the fundamental problem here. That it's not really, if you see how cars evolve, also now they put all kinds of new electronics in cars. They put electric computer screens in cars. It's all for commercial motives. All the software in cars, you cannot really repair it yourself anymore. You are now tied to the brand that made the car. You cannot go to any type of garage to repair your car because they don't have the right software and the right tools. So it's all about basically follow the money. And yeah, so we have to, I always write about technology because technology is something that people that is easy. You can touch it, everybody can imagine it, while the economy is an abstract thing. So it's very hard to write about economy and make people kind of enthusiastic about another type of economy. But actually what the whole Low-Tech magazine does is to question the economic system. It's just that I'm doing it by using technology, by focusing on technology, because high tech and economic growth are really, they need each other. They cannot exist without each other. You cannot have economic growth without constantly innovating technology, and you cannot have constantly innovating technology without economic growth. But of course, we have more than enough technology by now. The solutions have been there for long. What we need is not really technical innovation, it's social innovation. It's what kind of life do we want? And do we really want to just get richer all the time? Okay, I stop because...
and I will end this by saying that I guess this winter in Europe will also show that there are these two ways of thinking. One is that what would we like to have, and the other is what actually can we have. And now this winter we will have a lot less energy available. So now we have the question: okay, what is actually doable? And the suits with other people body heat is a very interesting concept. That
Beds with curtains.
And beds with curtains. And I have, in my personal life, I have taken over the water bottle system from Kris's articles. Very good. I have a push lawnmower. I love it. And I also bought like this kitchen kind of slicing machine, but with the kind of hand crank. But the only way I could buy it was from this really cheap TV shop. And it's plastic, but it's the only one with the hand crank. Everything else is electrified, and I couldn't find anything, and then I had to buy the TV shop one. Sorry, but I know that if this breaks, I can fix it. This one I can fix. So thanks, Kris. I think you have been very what's the word? Inspiring. Yes. So
You're
thank
welcome.
you in the early morning.
Thank you for the invitation.